Halal Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakahak Radash. Double honors to the elder apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone who well for teaching His word in truth and sincerity. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect scattered abroad, and peace and salutations to the sincere Akim that's pushing His word in truth and sincerity to USA Shalom. 15-year-old convicted murderer sentenced to 100 years in prison. So, this is another case here in Babylon that shows how unrighteous this place is as far as its laws. They kind of, you want to say, they have a set of laws, but they kind of make it up as they go along. The laws are unjust and unfair, and they're definitely not according to the scriptures. So this is how you know that this place is unholy, man. It's unrighteous. This is Babylon the Great that is spoke of in the scriptures. A 15-year-old Indiana boy has been sentenced to 100 years in prison after being convicted in 2025 gang-related shooting that left one woman dead, another wounded, and a third injured when she was hit by a car fleeing the gunfire. Prosecutors said the boy, Jamaji Larry of Anderson, Indiana, was sentenced on Wednesday during a hearing before the judge, David Happy, of the Circuit Court of Madison County. Larry was one of 4 members of the Mickey Cobra Nation, MCN, gang charged with murder in the killing of 26-year-old De La Swain, who prosecutors said was shot in February of 2025 outside a nightclub in Anderson, a suburb of Indianapolis. Swain was shot during a botched hit on a witness to another homicide, prosecutors said. So these kids, they got into some sort of beef. They're part of a gang, and they're out here executing people. Whatever beef they had, they was out there trying to execute a witness to one of their crimes. I'm gonna keep reading. Larry and his co-defendant, 19-year-old Rashawn Samuels, who went on trial together, was convicted by a jury on June 30th, according to Madison County District Attorney's Office. During a court hearing on Thursday, Happy sentenced Samuel to 125 years in prison, prosecutors said. Following their convictions, Samuel and Larry admitted to an enhanced charge of being part of a criminal organization, according to prosecutors. Happy handed down a 50-year prison sentence to Larry for the murder of Swain and gave the teenager another 50 years for the gang enhancement charge. So you see how unrighteous this is, because they're targeting young Israelite males. They're targeting young swarthy kids. If it was an Edomite kid, the charges wouldn't have been as great. If you just look at that past incident, it wasn't a kid, but you had a Moabite male, gunned down a swarthy kid for allegedly taking a dollar bottle of water out of the store. So these are unjust laws, man. These you looking at unrighteous decrees, and I believe that's Isaiah 10:1. Get that one real quick. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that right grievousness which they have prescribed. So the law, they bend the law when it comes to their own people, but when it comes to you Israelites, you so-called blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, and whatever scattered Israelites that are here in Babylon, those laws get bent and not in our favor. Samuels was sentenced to 62 and a half years in prison for Swain's murder, and Happy imposed another 62 years and a half for the criminal organization enhancement charge. Indiana law requires that criminal organizations can pose a greater threat to public safety because they coordinate criminal activity, recruit others to participate in crime, and often commit offenses for financial gain or to further the goals of the organization, prosecutors said in a statement. So you can basically look this article up, but this just goes to show you how unrighteous this place is, and who they're targeting. When you really look at it, they're targeting Israelite males, and they leave households broken. They done stripped the father out of the household. They gave women unbelievable privilege, to do wickedness, not to obtain righteousness, but to do wickedness. But we're going to go into murder and killing, man, because there's a big difference in what they prescribe as murder and what they prescribe as killing, but they don't abide by the scriptures. So things are all twisted up and backwards here, and this was not justified by any means due to the scriptures as far as like a righteous killing. We're gonna go into Exodus 20. Go to verse 13. Thou shalt not kill. So when you look that up in the interlinear, you go into the word kill. That's Rasha.
Strong's H 7523. Radsach.
How it's spelt is Rasha, and it means to kill. Salakia, it means to murder, slay, kill. To murder, to slay, premeditated, accidentally, or avenger, slayer, to be slain, murder, assassinate, murder, assassin, to be killed. So these boys, and they young as hell, man. 15 and 19, they wasn't using their time productively, But that's all orchestrated, man, It's all orchestrated, by allowing the woman to rule the household, stripping the household of its father. But who knows, man? The father could have been in the household, but they could have been neglected. But either way, these kids were on you know what I'm saying, they were pretty much on murder sprees. If they felt that they were was done unjustly, and that's pretty much any gang, any gang of kids, group of kids that that look out for one another, and they're out there in the streets and quote unquote making money, doing what they please, trying to get what they want. If they feel they're done unjustly, man, they're gonna come after you. So these kids were basically murderers, man, and they're supposed to get dealt with in the same fashion. From here, we're gonna go to Exodus 22. And 3, 22 with verse 2, Salakia. It just shows you kind of like another version of, or an example rather, of a justly killing. It shows you the difference between a murderer and someone that had to kill someone. Exodus 22 and 2. If a thief be found breaking up and be smitten, that he die, there shall no blood be shed for him. So if you read it in the NLT, Exodus 22 and 2, if a thief is caught breaking in after dark and is struck by the owner so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. So there's a righteous killing and there's a unrighteous killing, which is called murder. From here, we're going to go to Numbers 35 and 30. Whoso killeth any person, the murderer shall be put to death by the mouth of the witnesses. But one witness shall not testify against any person to cause him to die. So, a righteous killing of a person, a person being put to death, this is a law going, into how that person is dealt with, when he commits a murder. So you have more than one witness, and that person shall be found guilty of his crime. And verse 31, this is Numbers 35 and 31. Moreover, ye shall take no satisfaction in the life of a murderer, which is guilty of death, but he shall surely be put to death. So basically, you can't take no bribes, So when you look at this court system, man, how this court system is set up, man, these are not a jury of your peers. They just randomly select members from that particular city or state, and you're subjected to their, to their interpretation, to their thought process, how they feel about it. They weren't witnesses to the crime, and they're getting paid to go to court. You get paid for jury duty time, for time in the, being in a juror. So those are bribes, You're not being bribed to sway your opinion one way or the other, but nevertheless you're getting paid to sit there and pass judgment on someone you don't know, someone that you haven't seen, commit a crime. So this is just showing you how unjust this place is, and it's showing you how wicked our people are, man. This dude just started hailing gunfire at someone he thought or known to be a witness to one of his crimes, and he was going to sentence that person to death. So this is just showing you that this place has to go, man. Like, there's no real order here, man, and there's no real protection here for dark-skinned, melanated people, man. Even though this is not a place of our rest, man, this is a place of our punishment. But everything is supposed to be done, in decency and in order. Everything is supposed to be done justly. If these people claim to be quote unquote Christians, and their standards are of the Bible, they should be using the Bible to judge to judge all matters. Let's going over to Romans 13. And we'll read verse 4. For he is a minister of power to thee for good. But if thou do which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of power, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. We can read that in the NLT, Romans 13:4. For he is God's servant to you for good. But if you do wrong, you should be afraid, for he does not carry the executioner's sword for nothing. He is God's servant. He is God's servant, an avenger who brings punishment on the wrongdoer. So, these people claim to be, just. They claim to be doing their work according to God's will, according to the scriptures, but that's not so, because you wouldn't give these kids 100 years, 125 years for these crimes. They do that because they make money off these people. Off of criminals. When you get thrown in jail, money is generated, man. So these people make big time money off of these jails, off of these prisons, which is definitely unjust. So he's a murderer. He should have been, you find more than one witness, and you basically put these kids to death for their crimes, for their crimes of murder. Deuteronomy 21, and we'll read verses 18 through 21, and this just shows you when a child is stubborn, and rebellious, that they be brought forth amongst the community, and they'll be judged. And it doesn't necessarily prescribe to the acts of murder, but it shows you what how to deal with these issues according to the scriptures. Deuteronomy 21:18. For if a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, not hearken unto the and will chasten him, will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him and bring him out unto the elders of his city, and unto the gates of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of his city shall stone him with stones, that he die. So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. So, there's ways of conducting ourselves here, and these people claim to be of the Bible. They claim to be holier than thou. They claim to be righteous, but they're not. They have unrighteous decrees. Their laws are unjust. Even though these kids did a heinous crime, they're supposed to be put to death for their crimes. They're not supposed to be, sitting there rotting in prison. There's a way to go about these things. That's how these people are not it. You got, I don't want to go off from the subject, but you got Edomites, so-called white men over in our land who claim to be us, committing all sorts of atrocities and unrighteous decrees, unrighteous acts. Then you got these Edomites over here that claim they're the people, and they're committing the same type of heinous crimes. So these people are wicked, man, and there's no just in them. They're not just at all. So let's see. Let's go into Proverbs 17. The eye that mocketh at his father and despiseth to obey his mother, the ravens of the valley shall pluck it out, and the young eagles shall eat it. So who knows what these kids' parents was like. I looked up Jumanji's parents, but it didn't have no information on them. But most likely they were neglecting them. They didn't discipline him in the right manner. They just let him run wild and do what he want to do. Or he may have been, exposed to, certain elements in the community which drove him to join in that gang. Because usually if you have a 2-parent household and they're working hard and they're treating you justly, treating you fairly, providing the things that you need, you tend not to join these gangs. You always have, that one or two that would do that, just, roughly speaking. You always have those that will, just straight up disobey their parents and go ahead and do these type of things. But usually, man, when you have a parent in the house and they're doing just by you and they're trying to live just and they're providing for you your basic necessities, then you tend not to do these things. But it's telling you right here, man, like usually, like your kids shouldn't be looking at their father, mocking them, and they should be obeying their mother. So your parents, you shouldn't be looking at them in these manners. You should be obeying. You should be obeying what they're saying. Going to, if they telling you to do something, you go ahead and do it. Let's stay in the book of Proverbs. Let's go to chapter 13. And 24. He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chastiseth him betimes. So you look at that one in the NLT. He who withholds the rod of discipline hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines and trains him diligently and appropriately with wisdom and love. So, that just goes back into what I was saying, man. If you treating your children justly, you taking care of them properly, they tend not to do these things. So the onus is also on the parent, man, that they didn't do what they were supposed to be doing. So these are, this is just another case of how our people go off, man, and how when you stray away from the scriptures, man, and you go on your own accord, you trying to do things without justifying it through the scriptures. It shows you how these things, can go awry, when you don't have fear of the Lord and you're not trying to live your life, quote unquote, righteously, godly, even though a lot of people don't understand the scriptures, but they tend to, have that fear of God to the sense of, they try to do things justly. Some people are just scared of the law of the land, like Edomite's law. Some people are just scared of their law, so they try to move accordingly. But the whole thing, man, is to understand these scriptures and live life and accordingly, and raise your family according to the scriptures. This is Zephaniah 3 and 5. The Lord Yahweh is in the midst thereof. He will not do iniquity. Every morning doeth he bring his judgment to light. He faileth not, but the unjust knoweth no shame. So every morning, according to the scriptures, the Lord bring forth judgment. So all these are righteous, man. Whether it's the left hand of Yahweh or the right hand, everything is done in righteousness. So who knows why that woman got caught in that crossfire? Maybe he used that kid to avenge, something she did. And now, he's going to suffer his judgment, at some point. But man's goings of the Lord. That's Proverbs 20 and 24. So our thoughts is not his thoughts. Our ways is not his ways, roughly paraphrasing. But the Lord doeth all, man. This is Proverbs 20 and 24. Man's goings are of the Lord Yahweh. How can a man then understand his own way? So, but nevertheless, this is exactly why 2/3 of Israel have to be purified with fire, because they're stiff-necked, they're sottish children, meaning stupid, foolish, and they don't listen, man. You know, they don't fear the Lord. They don't know the Lord. You know, at some point we all was like that, you know, because we lost our remembrance here. But you have many that have heard this word and ignored it, bucked up against it, and because of that, you know, this is going to be their land of purification through nuclear fire. Kohalo Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakahak Radash, Abad Babal.